The only tyrant I will accept in this world is the still small voice within me. And even though I have to face the prospect of being in a minority of one, I humbly believe that I have the courage to be in such a hopeless minority. And this week's opening quote comes from Mahatma Gandhi. Welcome to Surviving the Matrix, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Maxwell Egan. It's a pleasure to be with you once again, and I will be your host for the next hour. And I don't really have anything planned at all for today's show, folks. I've been so busy. I've got to prepare for AV9 and all sorts of stuff, but I thought I'd get a show out to you anyway. And I thought that just to give myself a break and perhaps give you a break as well, and to do something completely different to the norm, I might just perhaps revisit some of my original influences and look at some of the things that originally got me started on this path, and just ponder a few questions that I think it's important to ask. Questions about how we got here, for example, where we are and what this place is, and what's really going on here, because nothing is what we're being told. I mean, that's a given, but what is really going on here? And this is a question that I think most people ask at some stage in their lives. Indeed, it is the question that initially sends you down the rabbit hole. And there are so many rabbit holes to go down. But there is some point in most people's life where they simply look around them and say, is this all there is? There's got to be something more to this, and is everything that I've been told true? And that's what starts people off on their journey of enlightenment, if that's what you can call it. Their journey of discovery, anyway. What is this place really, and how did we really get here? What are we? Where are we? Where did we come from? And the thing is, folks, with even asking a question like that, I mean, it's anybody's guess, and all we can do is speculate. But I think it's important that we do speculate because, as I said, things are certainly not the same. And this is something that I tried to touch on in the book that I put out in 2005, Earth's Forbidden Secrets, when I just pointed out in that book that everything we'd been told about history is wrong. And I make that statement with absolutely no hesitation at all, simply because when you go out and look around the world, you find that nothing can be explained by the current timeline of history that we're given. And how we got here is really a very interesting question to ponder. How we got here, as far as the control system goes, is of course someone had an idea, put it into motion, and here we are. But when you look at the control system and you look at what we've really done since the Industrial Revolution, if you will, it's really quite miraculous. It really is. Even when you look at what we've done in the last 30 or 40 years, technology has simply snowballed. Some of the technology we're using now is stuff that was never dreamt of when I was a child. It was all science fiction when I was a child. This was stuff out of Flash Gordon and bizarre comic books, but even Flash Gordon and some of the bizarre comic books didn't have the stuff that we've got now. It's really come out of nowhere, and it's snowballed to such an extreme that you really have to wonder where it all comes from. And many people have been asking this question, and it's so difficult to find where it comes from because of the mishmash of information that's out there for us to consume. In the first film that I put out way back in 2008, one of the first things that I said in that film was the most effective way to hide a real conspiracy is to create a conspiracy culture around it, to make everything look like a conspiracy and to get everybody questioning anything. And when you do find a real truth, or if a real truth does get exposed, to embellish it to the point that it becomes unbelievable. So it just becomes another conspiracy theory with all the other conspiracy theories. And if you get a few people penning these ideas and putting them out there, or here's this ancient document we found, and here's this ancient book that was printed and says all this stuff, and you really don't know. All you know is that what people have said it is. They've said what that document is. They've said when that book was printed, but we don't really know. It could have just been put out there with a date on it. We just don't know. We don't know what's been done to lead us astray, and how many red herrings have been created, and how effective the mechanism has been in creating these red herrings. Although, looking at the conspiracy culture today, I'd say it's been a pretty effective method they've used. But the point is, what I'm saying here is you can't really date a lot of the information that we believe we can date, because all that really can be confirmed is that which exists within living memory. That's what we've got. We don't really have any idea where we are, where we come from, or what's really going on here at all. And when you look at the growth of technology in the last 100 years, it really is quite amazing that we've managed to achieve what we've achieved, which again begs the question, where did it all come from? In my last film that I put out in 2012 called Transformation, I asked the question in that film, who was it who first pulled a rock from the ground and decided to beat it into metals? How did they even know what metals were? And even then, how did they know about metallurgy? How did they know how to develop any of these things? And why would they need metals to begin with? And you might think, well, we needed metals because it was just a natural development for weapons or plowshares or whatever. But think about it. If you were living in a hunter-gathering society, which is what society would have been, if we're living in our natural state, that's what you'd be doing. You'd be living in a society kind of like the American Indians, and even they had stone arrowheads and things like that. So why would you need metals? Why would you even have the time to look for metals or create metals? What would you need them for? They wouldn't be part of what you need to build a hut. They wouldn't be part of what you need to go and gather food, because you'd already have ways of doing that. The point is, you wouldn't even be thinking of stuff like metal because it isn't something that you would need for your life. And it isn't like you're going to pick up a rock and say, hey, I think I'll turn this into metal, because you wouldn't even know what metal was. There's no reason you would need technology to survive in your natural state. So where did technology come from? How did we come up with this stuff to begin with? Not to mention what we've got now, which is absolutely through the roof. Like I said, it's just snowballed in the last 30 to 40, 50 years. Since the invention of television, it's just gone through the roof. And television is, of course, what's helped it go through the roof. Television and movies, predictive programming, all the futuristic stuff that they've been showing us for so long, just preparing us for this as a natural progression, but we never ask where it comes from. All this futuristic stuff. How did we come up with this stuff? If you were sitting there in a lab, would you come up with any of this stuff? That's the question, folks. Where did it come from? And people will hear that and they'll go, oh, well, it was the scientists. It was all the smart people. I'm not smart enough to do it. It was the smart guys. Really? Is that what you think? It was the smart people who just came up with all this stuff because they're just so smart? That's an interesting concept. And as I said, since the invention of television and all the predictive programming that's gone along with it, they've really been able to escalate this. It's literally snowballed. Technology has rolled out in an exponential curve in the last 50 years. But where did it come from to begin with, is the question. And even when you look at our technology, some of the ancient artifacts and monuments and things that are lying all over the earth, some of the round stone balls that you find through Costa Rica, the myriad of monuments you find all over the place through Peru and in Egypt and all sorts of places. None of these can be created through the technology that we've got now. None of them were created via any method that we know of. So where did the technology that we use now come from? Who would have thought of this stuff? And what was the technology that built all the old stuff that's there? And when was that old stuff built? All these old monuments, stuff that we call ancient, are they really as ancient as what we think they are? See, it's so difficult to get any real handle on history because there's been so much effort undertaken to destroy history. And really, that's what we're seeing now in the Middle East. Why do you think they wage all these wars in the Middle East? It's because it's the cradle of civilization. And they're just destroying history all over the Middle East. They're destroying all the ancient artifacts they can, all the ancient cities they can, all the ancient structures that they can. Because the stuff that's there in the Middle East that they're bombing in Syria, places like Aleppo and Palmyra, these are far older than the places that you find in Europe. Remember when they went into Iraq, one of the first things that the Allies did when they went into Iraq in the Gulf War was they looted the Baghdad Museum. And a lot of the artifacts from the Baghdad Museum were actually found scattered around the side of the road in certain back areas in the United States. All smashed to pieces, of course, but I remember some of these things even made the news, the fact that they were found. So they went in there specifically to destroy the history, to locate all the ancient artifacts that indicated there was any history, and just take them and destroy them. Many of these things were priceless, and they didn't even sell them. They didn't sell them on the black market or anything. They just took them to destroy them. So there's an effort undertaken by modern governments and modern academia to destroy and hide history. There were shiploads of artifacts taken out to sea and dropped off the coast of the United States by certain academic institutions because they told a different story to history. So it's been an ongoing effort ever since the invention of government. And it isn't just modern governments that have done this, it's been an ongoing thing as far back as we can find. The question is why? Over the ages, there's been so many groups that have destroyed so much stuff. I mean, the burning of the Alexandrian Library, for example, which was burnt by one or two, possibly even three groups of people, burnt by the Christians, burnt by the Arabs, burnt by anybody who wanted to burn it. The scrolls in the Alexandrian Library powered the baths. They heated the baths in the Temple of Alexandria for 18 months. That's how many scrolls there were, papyrus scrolls that they simply burnt to heat the baths. You look at ancient Egyptian civilization, it seems to have sprung full-blown into being right from day one. That all seems perfectly normal. Look at Chinese civilization. That's always been an incredibly advanced civilization and always very hidden, and we don't know anything about where that came from because many Chinese emperors took it upon themselves to destroy all the history books that existed before them because they decided they would be the beginning of history and history should start with them and there should be no one before them. So they destroyed all of the ancient scrolls that existed before they were born, before they took rulership, so their history would start there. And I think a couple of emperors actually did that in China. So it's pointless looking there for any information. We may have got something from the Mayans, but the Spanish did a great job of destroying all of their information. We do have one or two codexes left, but people simply can't translate them properly. Of course, there's a rich history to be found in Europe, but God knows what it is, because Europe has been a war zone since recorded history even started. So it's very difficult to know what happened there, because there's been so many cultures come and go, and so many armies march across the land, and so much destroyed across Europe. And of course, as in the case with any good battle, history is written by the winners. So it's just a hopeless exercise trying to put anything coherent together from any artifacts you find lying around Europe. So it's very, very difficult to know anything about ancient history. All we've got is little snippets. And certainly what we're told in Western academia, in Western academic history books, are nothing even close to the truth. Because, as I said, there are monuments lying all over the earth which tell a completely different story to anything we'll find in Western history books. I mean, you've got all those things that I mentioned before, such as the ruins in Peru, which are all over the mountains in Peru, and you've got them in Costa Rica, the giant balls, the stuff in Egypt. There's all sorts of bizarre ruins and temples all over Mexico and Central America as well, but you've also got really strange vitrified ruins that can be found all across Europe. We've got Baalbek in Lebanon, an absolutely incredible site and very mysterious. They tell us, of course, that it was built by the Romans and later had a temple built on top by the Arabs, but there's no evidence to support this claim. There's actually foundations there that are incredibly old, and there's no record of them being built in any Roman literature anywhere.